Overnight, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released one of the funniest videos that I've seen in a long time. It's like a Saturday Night Live bit, claiming that Israel has no desire or intentions to interfere in Syria's internal affairs. Watch this comedy. And as Caitlin Johnstone wrote this morning, quote, only Israel could invade and occupy large stretches of a country, bomb it 480 times in 48 hours, destroy 80% of its military defenses, and then claim it has no intention of interfering in that country's internal affairs. She nails it. Meanwhile, the rebranding of the CIA-backed brutal terrorists now controlling Syria is happening in real time. But our next guest says this rebranding didn't start just this week. After the occupation by the Biden administration, it's been happening for years. Dan Cohen from Uncaptured Media is all over this story and joins me now. Dan, good to see you. So how far back does this go?
Well, I began covering the Syria conflict, the dirty war on Syria, in 2016. And at that point, it became very clear to me that the U.S. was not very secretly funding, arming, training, and not only the U.S., its allies in the UK, Qatar, Turkey, the UAE, Saudi Arabia were funding and arming and training a variety of terrorist groups, what the U.S. government has acknowledged as terrorist groups, and many of them are officially listed as terrorist groups, in order to destroy Syria's sovereignty. It was never about Assad himself or the Syrian prisons or anything like that. It was about destroying Syria. And that's what they've just achieved. Now, in order to do that, of course, they had to wage an incredible propaganda campaign to convince Americans that Al-Qaeda was actually the good guys. I'm old enough, and I assume most of our viewers are, and I know you were around, Clayton, when 9/11 happened, and the government said Al-Qaeda did it, and we have to launch wars on Afghanistan and then Iraq and have permanent war on terror, some amorphous concept, all over the globe. And that's never actually stopped. But in the middle of that, there was a rebranding effort to make Al-Qaeda into the heroes against the evil dictator Assad. And when I first really became aware of it when I started documenting it, was 2017. And that was when the Syrian government, with the help of Hezbollah and Russia, beat back these terrorist militias from the cities they occupied. And I was here in Washington, D.C. on a short visit, and there happened to be a screening in Congress of a film called Cries from Syria by a Russian-American director whose previous film was called Oy Vey, My Son is Gay. His name's Yevgeny Afanevsky. And then he somehow got to become a geopolitical expert of sorts on Syria and on Ukraine, the two, big U.S. dirty wars. And so I went to this film screening. There were a number of very neoconservative members of Congress there, like Adam Kinzinger, the kind of young man's John McCain. There was S.E. Cupp, the CNN, at that time, a CNN host. There was, a number of these figures. And one of them was a guy named Charles Lister, who is a so-called expert at the Middle East Institute, which is a think tank here in D.C., funded by Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, all of the same regimes that are funding these terrorist groups to destroy Syria. So I want to show this clip of what I actually caught Charles Lister. I recorded him saying in Washington, D.C. Before his audience in the U.S. Capitol, Lister portrayed Al-Qaeda as a popular movement with broad support in Syria.
Al-Qaeda has really got it right, I hate to say.
He then went on to claim Al-Qaeda is more moderate than ISIS, despite the fact that the two groups share the same genocidal ideology.
Although they've become more aggressive and more hardline over time, they are still very distinctly different to ISIS. Their strategy is so much more effective on the ground. They are winning hearts and minds.
So they really got it right. I mean, they're not like ISIS. These are good guys.
Yeah. They're like nice ISIS. They're Pal Qaeda is what I like to call them.
Al-Qaeda.
It was amazing because if you were paying attention to what was happening in Idlib province in northwestern Syria, where Al-Qaeda, then it was called Jabhat Fatah al-Sham, then, they went through a series of rebrands from Jabhat al-Nusra, which was the original Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria. Then it became Jabhat Fatah al-Sham. Then it became HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is the one that they're using today. And they formally broke links with Al-Qaeda, but the ideology is completely the same. It's like when Blackwater, rebranded after its scandals and became Academy, and it's just again and again it happens. So they just expect we're going to swallow that down. But it was just amazing for me to see this open glorification of Al-Qaeda as some popular group, when if you're paying attention to what was going on in Idlib, there were summary executions of women simply accused of adultery in the street. They're indoctrinating generations of children to be terrorists. And I hate to say that, but that's the sad truth. And here in Washington, they're saying, oh, this is actually very moderate. And then fast forward to 2019, when the U.S. took out al-Baghdadi. The Trump administration took out al-Baghdadi in Idlib province. Well, al-Baghdadi at that point was basically toothless. He was not really running anything in Idlib province. Al-Jolani, the guy who's now running Syria, was running Idlib at that point. And it's very curious to me why the U.S. took out Baghdadi, but all this time did not want to take out Al-Jolani, because I think he is basically a NATO asset. Everything he did,
Wow.
he's backed by Turkey. Everything came through Turkey. The whole dirty war on Syria was basically run through southern Turkey. And so that's why he was allowed to live and continue to organize, why he was had a basically advanced NATO military capabilities, so they could so easily overrun the Syrian military. So, this really goes back to the mid 2000s is when I kind of first began documenting it. And remember that Netflix is staffed by a bunch of former Obama administration officials. When the Obama administration ended, they all went into Netflix so they could basically do deep state propaganda.
It's remarkable. We had Congressman Thomas Massie on the show yesterday who confirmed what you're saying here. He said he was debunking this in real time, and these people are on the current U.S. terrorist watch list. Like, this isn't some sort of fabrication, right? They've been on the terrorist watch list in the United States. So it's amazing to me. And so, wow. This is a big revelation that Jolani, this terrorist, is likely a NATO asset, basically a CIA asset, who's now, the reason they didn't kill him is because they were controlling him and allowing this to happen ahead of President Trump taking office on January 20th. There was a rush to kind of push this through. That's Congressman Massey's position on this, that there was a speed up process to make this happen sooner rather than later, so that President Trump couldn't do anything about it, essentially. And then we see all of these reports over the past 24 hours of huge pallets of money showing up as well, to fund, basically handing them tens of millions of dollars in funding, weapons. So basically funding and arming HTS, these terrorists in Syria.
Exactly. Yes, the congressman is absolutely right. This is clearly done before President Trump could take office with his anti-war sensibilities. I did not vote for President Trump. I'm not really a fan of him, but the fact is he has contradictory positions in which he has instincts that are anti-interventionist, as he said in his tweet. This is not our fight. Let's stay out of it. Now, of course, President Trump also ordered the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general who was the lead anti-ISIS fighter, and he won't admit that, that was a huge boon to ISIS, and there were huge celebrations in Idlib province when he did that. But nonetheless, he is correct that, the U.S. should not get involved with this anymore. There's nothing good that will come from it. So yeah, I mean, this is just the reality of it.
It is, and it's really disturbing. What was your response to seeing Jolani on CNN? Like, this rebranding, they're elevating this guy and doing these, like, CNN and the Democratic media are just lifting these guys up. And you've seen the reports from CNN, as we featured here earlier in the show. These weird CNN reports from Syria showing just how oppressive everything has been, and now the terrorists that these rebels that have taken over, it's going to be sunny skies now in Syria.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible to watch that Clarissa Ward piece where she obviously staged the quote unquote liberation of a prisoner from the Sadnaya prison, in which he's apparently been there for 3 days after everyone else was emptied out of the prison, and he claims to have not seen the sun for months and months, and he walks outside and he's well groomed, his beard is groomed, he's not starved, his fingernails are even clean, and he walks out and the first thing he does is look directly up at the sun. It's so clearly staged, and this is the same Clarissa Ward that faked being under attack by Hamas in Israel, totally staged a scene, and Clarissa Ward's she was so upset about the lack of intervention to overthrow Assad years ago that she said, "I'm no longer a journalist, I'm an activist." And she wrote some angry, deranged email to Ben Rhodes, who was a national security advisor, and
Obama.
Said, yeah, exactly, under Obama, and and was just angry that the Syrian government had been hadn't been overthrown. And this is, you can't spell Clarissa without CIA. That's what I would say about Clarissa Ward. I mean, she's just one of them. Arwa Damon, who sniffed a supposedly sarin-laced backpack she found on the ground. That's how she determined it was sarin. Of course, CNN spread the 40 beheaded babies hoax to basically stimulate support for the genocide of Gaza. This is CNN. This is not journalism. This is not fact finding. This isn't about the Syrian people. This is about propaganda.
Yeah, no, it's a great summation of it. This rebranding of Al-Qaeda as Pal-Qaeda. CNN is working lockstep with them in the deep. We see this in the media. We know that CNN, we know the New York Times, the Washington Post are just extensions of these deep state operatives in the intelligence community. And then the Americans, if they get 10 minutes of news a day and, they're after work, they have a busy day and they flip on CNN for a few minutes, they'll see this. They'll say, oh, wow, that's amazing. This guy was just liberated from a prison, and wow, these people have done great work. And then they go about their day taking care of their families. And this is how the propaganda spreads. So it's our job to make sure that it doesn't. And Dan has done an amazing job of this. Follow Dan over at his great website and YouTube channel, Uncaptured Media, and follow him on X as well. Dan, what's your X handle?
My X is at Dan Cohen 3000. My website is uncaptured.media. And if I can make one more point, Clayton, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I want Americans to think about the fact that Al-Qaeda is now being rebranded by the minute as some kind of beneficial force. Yet after 9/11, our civil liberties were taken away. We had the Patriot Act. We had the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. We had everything we go through at TSA to this day. All this phony kind of theater about security, where if your toothpaste tube is slightly too big, they take it away because that could be somehow dangerous. When I go to the airport and I watch a mom who's traveling with 3 kids alone, and the container she has for her pumped breast milk has to be dumped out. All of that stuff is a result of what the national security state did as a pretext to fighting terrorism after 9/11. And now Al-Qaeda is being rebranded as good, but our civil liberties, all that wiretapping, listening in on our conversations, that's not going away. That's here to stay. So are they going to give us that our freedoms, our liberties back now that Al-Qaeda is good again? Of course not. But I think we just have to be able to think bigger and not be goldfish bouncing back and forth in the little goldfish bowl, and just turn around and keep going. There's a much bigger agenda to not only destroy Syria and destroy Gaza, but to destroy America, to take away our freedoms, exactly what they said that they were trying to stop, to destroy the social fabric of our society and implement pre-existing agendas.
No, that's one of the smartest points I've heard on this show in quite a while, and I really appreciate it. And think about it: will they give us our civil liberties back now that Al-Qaeda is our friend, and they took them away? We have to take off our shoes at the airport because of Al-Qaeda terrorists trying to blow up aircraft and too much liquid in a toothpaste tube. You're exactly right about that. Well said. That's something for all of us to think about as you watch this propaganda unfolding. And I would like journalists to ask that question to the Biden administration. If you get to sit down, Kristen Welker over at NBC sat down with Trump. Will you sit down with Biden administration officials and press them about this rebranding of Al-Qaeda? Now they're our friend at this holiday season. How many Americans would invite Al-Qaeda over for their Christmas dinner? I wonder how many people would open up the doors for that. Dan, great to see you as always, and really great points. Really, 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 really great points. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks so much, Clayton. Always appreciate it.